All right, you guys know this because we talk about it a lot here on Return on Podcast, but the time for having all of your eggs in one basket with just one Amazon marketplace and ignoring opportunities to become more of an omni-channel seller, that time has passed. The irrational multiples that smaller brands were picking up in the market when they sold their businesses just for having one product in one marketplace and one supplier and one prayer, right? That whole thing, that model is kind of dying because the marketplace is becoming more demanding. As a result, we need to have some diversification. We need to learn how to experiment beyond whatever we're currently doing. Now, depending on your product type, that might mean just going to the EU for Amazon, or maybe trying one of the Asian marketplaces. That could mean getting more serious about TikTok or Walmart or your own website. It just means that you have to do something. And this discussion that we're going to have in today's episode with Vincenzo from Ecomcy, he's right in the center of that universe for helping growing, scaling e-commerce and Amazon brands look beyond what has worked, what could become the limiting factor for growth in the future. And we're going to talk about how to make successful experiments, how to test the data, and how to potentially lean into TikTok and Walmart a little bit more. So I hope you enjoy this interview with Vincenzo. I think you're going to like it. He's a great guy, and he's got a lot of interesting thought leadership around how to better run your Amazon brand. It's time to maximize profitability and cash flow. It's time to learn habits and hacks from the best e-com CEOs. It's time for Return on Podcast with me, Tyler Jeffcoat. All right, guys. In today's episode of Return on Podcast, I'm excited. I'm pumped. I'm sure you are too. I'm going to be bringing my friend Vincenzo from Ecomcy into the show. Vincenzo, how are you doing today?
Great, Tyler. It's a pleasure to be here. How you doing, my friend?
Man, life is so good. So a little behind baseball here, you guys. I'm feeling a little deja vu because Vincenzo and I did this in reverse about 3 or 4 weeks ago, where I was on his podcast. Hey, remind everybody, Vincenzo, what's the name of your podcast? I want to give it a shout out here.
The e-commerce lab. Yeah, the e-commerce lab.
The
Yeah.
e-commerce lab. Bam. So this guy's a great interviewer. The episodes that I listened to were incredible. So if you're into this kind of content, I just want to encourage you on the front end here to check out his podcast. All right. So Vincenzo, we have a lot to talk about today. And I think we're going to get in deep on a topic that really is resonating with a lot of sellers and brand builders right now. Before we get there, I want to just kind of humanize you a little bit, man. Give me a little bit of your journey. How did you, I always ask people like, what went wrong where you decided all of a sudden you got to own a business, man? What happened?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna say a little bit about my background. So, originally born in Italy, raised in Venezuela. That's also you can feel a little bit that Spanish accent. I
Okay.
speak Spanish. I grew up in Venezuela until I was 18. Then, because of the situation with the country, as many people I'm sure heard on the news and everywhere, I decided to leave the country, and then I decided to do a little bit of English. My English studies in the US, then Canada. Eventually landed in the UK because I was looking for a university to do my major, which is
Okay.
actually nothing to do with e-commerce. My major is actually aerospace engineering. So it's what
What?
you call a rocket scientist.
That's so cool. By the way, there's no
So
major, like if you lived in the States, maybe this is true in other countries, but there's no major that ought to pick you up women easier, I
yeah.
think, than being a rocket scientist. I mean, did it work out for you the way I hope it did?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that when you bring that to the conversation, most people have heard it only once or twice. So it's like,
And by the way,
wow,
just to
okay.
contrast that, Vincenzo, like if when you bring to the conversation that you're studying accounting, oh man, you get a lot of yawns, you get vacant stares. She starts looking at her watch, wondering when
I
the next
know.
appointment's coming, right?
I know,
So,
I know. Like for me, thankfully, yes, it's definitely being a good conversation started. But at the same time, even from the knowledge perspective, like all the technicality that brought to my life in terms of how I attack certain things, in terms of making a strategy, even for my brand, so for my clients and everything, is from a very engineering kind of mindset. And then I think gave me a huge advantage when it comes to really executing things and make them basically deliver results in terms of for myself and my clients. So going back to my story, so I can connect it how I basically jump into the Amazon space. I was basically finishing my major as an aerospace engineer, and then I started working in Rolls Royce. So if you don't know, like Rolls Royce has actually a division that they do engines for airplanes. That's actually one of the main sources of revenue for them. And essentially, I was working for them for 2 years. And the reason why the business idea came to fruition is because I come from a family that only had business, like my grandfathers, my father, my uncle. So I always had that entrepreneurship mindset. But at the same time, I love engineering and I like technicality and science and all of that. So the issue happens that when I start working as an engineer, I realized, yes, I love all the side of engineering, but I don't love the fact that you're capped into how much money you can do, your location, your time. So I said, I definitely want to do something with engineering, but I rather let me actually focus first on building wealth, that then I can use that to do something that really is going to impact in the engineering world. And that's where I said, let's figure out if I can do some extra money on this side, right? To actually make that happen in the long term. So I started looking online, and then I found out Amazon FBA as one of the options. And then I started selling online. I started using my salary as an engineer. And basically, I was taking a lot of risk because I knew every single month I had my salary. So I could invest all the salary of 1 month. And then even if that part flop, come back next month, rinse and repeat. So I did a lot of basically launches and everything. And then eventually some pros started to kick in. And until a point that I was making more money with that than my actual engineer. So when
Right.
that point reached, I said, okay, I'm gonna take a year gap because I think there's definitely something here. I like the flexibility in terms of time, in terms of I can be wherever I want. At the same time, I don't have a cap in terms of how much money I can do. So let me go all in. I take a year gap, and then after a year, never went back. Things basically started to grow very fast. And then at the same time, because once you enter the Amazon bubble, as many of you, I'm sure you are listening and watching this episode, you start going to conferences, masterminds, webinars. And then I said, wow, there's so many people that have amazing brands, amazing products, but they're really struggling with execution. Like there are things that they are really not implementing properly into the day-to-day operations. And then after myself sharing my learnings and the success and everything, people started to basically asking for advice. And I realized there was an extra opportunity on top of being a seller of actually being a consultant. So I come from a consulting world. I was a consultant for Rolls Royce. It's basically the same, but for e-commerce, right? So I say, okay, let me share all my knowledge and then create systems around this and basically create a team that can actually implement all my learnings but actually provide value to all these brands. And that's how it comes to basically started. It was over 5 years now. So right now we're a team of close to 40 people. We operate across pretty much any single location that Amazon is present, and we specialize on that, basically helping brands scale globally. So yeah, that's a
Right.
little bit about myself and the story.
I love it. So Venezuela to the UK to rocket science to Rolls Royce of all companies. By the way, as like Americans, I don't know if this is across the world, but we definitely like have a like high level of respect, whether for Rolls Royce, just because none of us ever see them here, right? They're just not that many
Yeah.
in the United States, and I know that's an aerospace side of what they're doing, and so I really love that, Vincenzo. I love the idea of taking a really technical kind of scientific background and in my mind, some of the most successful brand builders, especially using marketplaces like Amazon that I've worked with, kind of have a pretty scientific approach to testing new ideas. You mentioned launch, fail,
Mm.
fail. Ooh, this one gets traction. This one's working.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's really interesting. So we're going to dig into a particular topic that's near and dear to both of our hearts, but I just want to ask you a broad question. Like, what do you feel like you're learning right now? I don't know. I'm just going to stop right there. What are you learning? What is it that has your mind occupied right now?
Yeah. So I would say some of the things that I love about this industry is that every single day I wake up, there's something new to learn. It's an industry that is always evolving, which is not something you can say of many industries. And that itself is, I think, a great thing, especially with myself implementing that engineering background. Like for me, it's all about implementing the feedback loop, right? So I try something, it didn't work. I try different version, it works. Then I combine that version with another version, rinse and repeat, and eventually 5 10 times down the line you have the perfect system. So that's
Love
something
it.
we are very attached in our team and our processes. So now in terms of what we're learning, so we do a lot of things in terms of figuring out how to bring the best results to our clients, because another day that's our role in the industry, right? People hire us
Right.
because they really want us to figure out the best part forward to their brand. So we're tapping a lot into things such as, for example, external traffic. We are going very hard on that. And that's one of the reasons, actually, over 1 month ago, we decided to become official partners with TikTok, because we strongly believe that social commerce is now pivotal pillar. I would say one of the main pillars is going to become in the commerce space, that you need to understand how to combine the social media presence of your brand with the correlation, how that influence your marketplaces, right? We're seeing great case studies already with some of the brands, whereby we doing amount of content within TikTok with the right influencer, with the right targeting, the right piece of content within the specific segmentation of the niche of products. We're seeing that bringing lift in terms of traffic and sales to our Amazon brands. So that's a quick example of how, by we testing things like that, we're able to bring the edge over the competition. Because most people, when they sell on Amazon, that's something we're discussing before going live. Unfortunately, they go into the Amazon bubble and they think Amazon is the only place to be when it comes to selling online. And I'm a big promoter that you really need to start becoming omni-channel. And that's something that every single time I meet with my clients on a weekly basis, like I'm always pushing ideas like, yeah, we need to try Walmart, we need to try Alibaba.com on your B2B operation, let's try Wayfair, let's try um, X, Y, and Z marketplace into different locations, which is one of the reasons, to conclude on this point, I'm actually traveling that much, because the goal for me long term is to really build a knowledge base around what is the right implementation in terms of how to evolve your brand depending on the region. Because we see that we always cut into a mentality that Amazon is the only place to be, but because that's what we see in the US and Europe. But when you go to Asia, when you go to the Middle East, you realize there are so many other marketplaces and basically placements that you can put your brand into, and they're completely blue oceans. So I think, yeah, that's what we're testing, actually, diversification and global expansion, because I think, like, the days of only be on Amazon and over, and we need to make sure that we start testing those other channels. So yeah, we can basically provide the knowledge to our clients and make sure they can adapt. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and Vincenzo, I think this makes a lot of sense because the kind of wave of aggregator venture private equity kind of capital in the space, it kind of incentivized some kind of insane behavior. And what I mean by insane is that the way to get a top multiple in your business when you sold it 3 years ago was actually to have a really kind of narrow
Mm-hmm.
Amazon only, five ASINs only, one supplier only, one marketing channel only business. And the reason for that was that these aggregators were operating under the thesis that we need these businesses to be as easy as possible to integrate into one operation.
Yeah.
But to your point, and I agree with you 100%, as we've seen the market, I would kind of say mature beyond
Mm-hmm.
that kind of acquisition. What we're seeing is kind of a regression back to common sense. And common sense is this: I am not actually building a brand that has a lot of sustainability if I'm 100% dependent on Amazon for all of my sales. And so I agree with you. Let me ask you this. This advice. So I'm buying it. I buy the story that if you're an Amazon dominant seller, it's probably time to consider investing in off Amazon channels to diversify. My first question to you before we talk about how to do that is this the kind of thing that all brands should do, or are there some products that work better for this approach than others? Like, what has your experience been in that regard?
Yeah, I think that the first principle we have to get out of this point is that when I say omni-channel, sometimes it could even relate going back to Amazon and just expand it to different regions. It doesn't mean you have to go
Fair
out
enough.
of Amazon in the first place.
Good point.
However, all the decisions 100% have to be data driven, and every single move we do is always with a market analysis upfront. We do projections, we do basically understanding what is the competition doing, reverse engineering what they've been doing outside of Amazon, and see if that's something actually that can provide value to you in the first place. That's, I think, by itself the main thing that is causing people to then create a bad stigma about going outside of Amazon, because most people, they do it as an automatic thought about what is my next homework to do in my business, rather than, okay, it's actually a valuable solution in the first place, right? They just do it because they have to tick a box, not because it actually makes sense. So if you do it by using data driven approaches, that there's many tools out there that you can do that when it comes to external places outside of Amazon. Like, you can have a very educated guess with a proper reporting about if actually it's a good move or not. And on top of that, I think something that basically made me realize that is definitely the way to go is because I'm a strong believer of also, the probability from a mathematical point of view. The more chances you add to the equation in terms of what that can create in terms of success for your business, the more probability you have to hit a home run, right? If you're putting all your eggs in a single location, that's the only thing you do over and over again. You don't change your process. Mathematically, the chances of change is like very minimal compared, like if you attack different fronts on a smart way again, in terms of finding that next thing in your business. So that's why I think.
Right.
And we see, I'm just going to give you a case study so you see what I mean. Like we had a brand that they are on the supplement space. Okay. So this brand, essentially, they were already controlling 70%, 60 to 70% on that specific niche. And essentially they wanted to hire us because they wanted to get to a 90, 80%, right? And we did some analysis and we realized actually the amount of time and money that is going to take you, we can basically take you to Europe and we can actually give you a better return into your investment in the long term in terms of diversification of where you're getting your revenue from, have less competition, and expand into new families of products that those regions need compared to the supplement niche within the US. So essentially, by doing that thing alone within 1 to 2 years, we pretty much managed to get close to 30 to 40% what he was doing in the US. So,
Mm.
which is huge compared to the same amount of time investment will take to, get the extra 10% in certain niches that in the US, you pay like $5 to $7 per click. It didn't make any sense. So that's a clear example how by thinking outside the box and basically bringing sometimes these solutions to the table, it can really make a huge difference. And we see every single day, we see with clients that they are stuck into the mentality, okay, only Amazon, Amazon, Amazon. We take them, for example, to Walmart, we're able to add another 10, 15% revenue, which is, again, in some business, that's a huge thing. That's an extra cash flow thing you can use to cover expenses or things along those lines. Or these brands that, for example, they never done any external traffic, and then we build a newsletter list outside of Amazon, we build ambassador, we build a loyal following, and then that down the line is going to create something that is basically a machine in terms of extra traffic and basically a loyal fans that are going to recommend that to their family, to their friends, and things that are really going to make you stand out on top of your competition that are only doing PPC. So all these things are things that I strongly think in 2024 you need to start having that conversation, because I see that all the time, especially because I see it every single day. Brands that come to me, I do an audit, and then they ask me, my sales are dropping and dropping and dropping. I don't understand why. I haven't done anything different. And when I do an audit in terms of what is actually happening, it's always new competition coming to the play. And when I reverse engineer what the competition is doing, is that they're doing external traffic, they're doing things outside of Amazon, they're actually creating a brand, not actually only a business on Amazon. And that's where most people on Amazon is dropping the ball. They think Amazon, instead of a channel, is their business. And when the competition comes with proper branding, understanding in terms of what actually is a brand, which is not only a logo, it's a whole ecosystem. That's
Yeah.
where people are seeing these huge drops into control of organic ranking, placements, their PPC performance, and so on. Yeah.
So when you, what I heard you saying there, just to kind of double click this, is I heard three, in my mind, I heard three really important principles, Vincenzo, that you brought up there. One is you need to have an empirical data
Hmm.
driven model
For
for
sure.
investigating new products and marketplaces and measuring the efficacy of those products and marketplaces. The beauty of that, Vincenzo, is that if you have a great data feedback loop, as you mentioned earlier, you have the ability to increase, kind of getting into game theory or the theory of constraints here. I have a hit rate and I have a number of at bats. And
Yeah.
ultimately, over the long term, I am, because guess what, guys? Some products are going to work better than others. And we can do a lot of research, but we don't always know until we test them. And so if we have good
Hmm.
data sets, we can give ourselves the leash to do a lot of tests so that we can get that success rate to be as high as possible with those multiple at bats. And then the third thing I want to mention that you didn't explicitly say this, but I think this is really important. Like, to have that kind of business model where I actually want to build a brand and I want to make that
Exactly.
brand more resilient by expanding my product line or expanding my marketplaces or my geography, I'm also going to have a little bit of a professional operation. And here's what I mean by that. Like, I am not going to be able to keep my eye on every ball if I'm launching 17 products a month or something like that, unless I have a team that can help me. And so I think those are the three things I took away from what you said there. One is we got to have a great data set with a great feedback loop, because guess what? If I'm testing 10 products and a few of them are going to fail, I've got to have the mechanism for killing those products and getting them off of my books. And
Yeah.
then I'm going to increase my hit rate if I have more at bats, but then I'm going to have a little bit more of a robust team. Maybe it's honestly, I mean, this is a shout out to you and me both here, but I think if you have good financial data and you have a good operations team that can help you with Amazon, it's a whole hell of a lot easier to take those risks and have them be small risk instead of them being bet the farm kind of risk. Anything else you would add to that part of the discussion?
Yeah, I would say something that I try to incentivize our clients as well is sometimes decisions are not always going to be driven 100% by data, but it's also about being smart in terms of identifying trends. And this is something I learned from my engineering background. When we were making decisions sometimes on making a new piece of tech, it was a decision that it was not going to make us money for the next 10, 15, 20 years sometimes, but it was a matter of early move advantage, right? And the same applies in e-commerce. Sometimes jump into some of these marketplaces. Yes, for example, I'm going to bring Walmart to the table, and I'm going to give an example. There was this brand that we put in Walmart over a year ago, and when we put this brand in Walmart, it was pretty much crickets, nothing. Search volume was very low, pretty much no demand. 1 year later, we're talking 14 months down the line. Now the keyword went from having 100 search volume to almost 2,000 search volume because he did that move 1 year ago. Now he's on top one of all the keywords organically. He has already like over 100 review because he started 1 year ago, and now his revenue went from a couple of $100 per month to now thousands per month because we saw that trend. And actually, when we did that jump to Walmart, I saw from a Google perspective and from Walmart the trend of the key was going up and up. And by doing some approximation, I knew that was going to eventually explode. It was going to happen in a few months, but it was going to happen. So what I'm trying to say, like sometimes the decision doesn't have to be in something like, yes, in 3, 6 months, it's gonna give me money. It's also about being smart and seeing trends, seeing what is happening in the news, what is happening with the way people is shopping, and make
Right.
that move in advance and understand that you're setting yourself for success in the future, which is some of the things most brands don't do. They make decisions only in terms of what I'm gonna see 1 month down the line, rather than making plans sometimes years down the line, which is most of the time the decisions are gonna more impactfully change your business. Yeah.
Vincenzo, if we could just use a spreadsheet and a math problem to get this 100% right, then there's no competitive advantage, right? I mean, there are a million guys out there that are probably better at math than I am or that you are. And so to your point, I think you got to do the math because so you can understand the risk profile of the program. And I'll say two things to that. One is yes, practicing some, by the way, they call this judgment. They call this wisdom. They call
Mm-hmm.
this vision, like having the idea to see what's going to be coming next. And it's a whole hell of a lot easier to build a multi-million-dollar brand if I just so happen to have the best product right as a trend hits than if I'm trying to kind of follow the wave. And I think that's so wise. Like brands have got to get into that, right? And the other thing I want to mention here that I think is I want to give you guys listening to this or watching this permission. If you are, and I'm a finance guy, listen, I'm the money guy here, right? It's like if
Mm-hmm.
you are budgeting, let's say you have 100K as your advertising budget,
Mm-hmm.
you need to have a small portion of that budget. Maybe it's 5 to 10K, maybe it's 12K. That is
Mm-hmm.
very experimental. That
Exactly.
is very future funnel.
Volatile, aggressive. Yeah, exactly.
Right. You've got to try new shit because if you don't, someone else is, and you're not going to be there when the opportunity hits. And so I want to circle back because, in particular, what are some things that we could invest in? Walmart's one, but you mentioned TikTok earlier, and I want to
Mm-hmm.
kind of circle back to that a little bit. Like, are you guys just from a tactical standpoint, or what are you learning related to TikTok that might help brands out there that want to invest in omni-channel?
Yeah, I would say the interesting thing about TikTok is that first of all, it's completely different compared to Amazon in the way they shop. So you're definitely tapping into an audience that sometimes doesn't overlap with Amazon. So it's a new set of eyes. But on top of that, it's a content creation machine, right? You can basically use these influencers that want to basically use your product as a way of them creating content and therefore make money. That if you tap into the right influencer, this can be a huge milestone in terms of the exposure it can give you at a fraction of the cost of only going, UCG and all of that in Instagram and Facebook and so on, right? So something that we're doing with some of our brands is that first of all, of course, we create a TikTok shop and all of that, and we create the presence and everything, and then we're using these influencers by cleverly target them the right influencers for a brand to start creating like an ambassador, right? Ambassador that basically keep showing your product into their videos and basically interacting with the product. And if you're very clever in terms of how you select these influencers, most of them they're gonna have a warm audience that whatever the influencer says or whatever is the new fidget spinner, they're gonna go and check it out. And some of the things we see specifically when it comes to doing content in TikTok, you also have to be very smart in terms of what pros could be compatible or not, which is, I think, one of the reasons why some people say TikTok is not working. Because, of course, if you come to TikTok and your product is only a chair or a table, of course, it's not something really that's going to be interesting to do a TikTok short about, right? Compared to some of the brands that we have makeup brands. So we have supplements, so we have toys, so we have dog products that it make it very engaging, and it's an easy click to action in terms of go buy this, try this, and all of that. So that's the first thing. The second thing, when it comes to TikTok, you have to consider is a lot of people sometimes, especially for products that are kind of new, like let's say you did a new product, right? A product that it maybe don't have a lot of exposure here on Amazon because there are not many keywords in terms of people need to be educated about the product. TikTok is perfect for that because
Mm.
TikTok is a platform that people get a lot of interruption pattern, like they're scrolling, they're watching somebody dance or whatever, and then they see the product. And then if you tap into the right audiences with that, you can start actually educating an audience about, oh, I keep seeing this new fidget spinner that I didn't know this existed. And then they will start searching for those keywords on Amazon. And over time, that will create actually a demand for those keywords in the way the influencer described in TikTok in Amazon. So then it can create a wave of interest on Amazon, right? If you're very smart with that. That's one example in terms of how you can use it to your advantage. The other advantage you can use with TikTok is that especially when the price point is over $15-20, that's not really an impulse buy. A lot of people, and that's the reality I'm seeing on TikTok, they don't 100% trust doing the shopping on TikTok yet. So they might use TikTok only as a discovery tool. They might see the product is $25-30, but then they will go to Amazon if you have your influencers to mention that on their videos. So, and then that surplus of traffic, we track it with things such as brand analytics and all of that, and we definitely see a lift in what we call a organic ranking, which at the end of the day is the goal of this, right? Make them come to Amazon, make the purchase of product, improve the organic ranking, that make our tacos get lower and therefore become more profitable. So overall, I mean, TikTok is being super powerful. I would say more from the content side of things, because then we can even repurpose that content, which we do that. For example, on our social media channel, Instagram, Facebook, we can even repurpose some of the videos if the ratio is then readjusted for example, Amazon post. There are so many ways of repurposing the content that is basically an epicenter that then it can attack multiple fronts at once if you have the right system. So that's why I would say is key. And also, it's not super expensive. Like, I think the misconception people have about TikTok is that you need to have all this creative team and you need to have this crazy expensive influencers. But actually, that's the beauty of TikTok. Influencers actually do the work for you. And you just have to filter that correctly. And then, of course, if you're gonna put the extra layer, which then requires money, you can run ads, which you can also be very clever with that and
Mm.
target the right audience. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is a little bit of a boom or bust. But
Hmm.
again, we're talking about not your whole budget. We're talking about a small portion of your budget needs to be experimenting. I believe, and I agree with what you said. You got to know yourself a little bit. There are some product types you're just not going to sell a whole lot of, whatever calculators or staplers on
It needs to
TikTok.
be something that is engaging and exciting. And the fidget spinner example I gave you, we had a client like that. It was a design that he patented and he did from scratch and everything. Nothing like that exists on Amazon. So TikTok was key for him because nobody really knew the product exists. So we had to use TikTok as a
Yeah.
educator machine to educate that niche, go very aggressive in content, create hundreds of videos, and then people start to do the hype. Wow, wow, what is this product? Where can I buy it? They start going to Amazon. And actually, we created the search and the demand around specific, very niche keywords that only he can control because of the patent and all of that. So again, that's where you can be very clever. You can use that for educational purposes, and then the search demand starts to be created on Amazon. Then you leverage that, right? So.
Beautiful. I love it. I think that's so good. So, guys, I think it's worth running some additional experiments. Know yourself, know your product. I love that idea that if you have a product that is, even if you think about it, if you're selling on Amazon and you have a fairly high refund rate because there's
Mm-hmm.
confusion on the product, I would say
Exactly.
there's two reasons we see high refund rates for our Amazon sellers. One is the product is poor quality, or two, the listing is confusing in terms of what it's telling the client to do. And so if you could leverage something like TikTok to educate the customer, they know how to use it, they know how to use it properly, they know what size is the right size for them, like that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You can really improve your FBA economics by not having a
Exactly.
13% refund rate.
Correct. Yeah, it's actually another thing you can use TikTok for. It's like you can also be very clever with your inserts. Like you could do things like in your insert, you invite your fans, the ones that buy your product, to share a video on TikTok to participate on a
Mm,
giveaway you do every month of something that could be like we had a client that every single month he does a giveaway of an iPad. Again, of course, he has a budget, but it actually a big incentive for people to put content on TikTok and then they use the hashtag and everything. Then we track and do the randomizer. But he gives up an iPad away. So then what he's doing, basically all these people, they go to their home, they do a quick video on their garden because it's a product for the garden. And then they submit it on TikTok, and then he can repurpose those ads to run ads or do whatever he wants with that. And it's a free, I mean, it's not free because he has to do the iPad, but on top of that, it's like very minimal compared to the amount of exposure he's getting because a mom, because a grandmother, a kid is doing these videos that make it very genuine of people actually engaging and enjoying that product that really coming from a sincere point of view, right? And an influencer pitching you, right? So this is very simple example. An insert, you create some incentive, of course, within TOS that just a giveaway, just an experience. You create content, you become part of our ambassador program, X, Y, and Z. And then is you invite people to create the exposure for free on TikTok, and then that TikTok reciprocate back to Amazon, and it's a spiral machine, and then you build a brand from there, and that's it.
love it. And by the way, this is great. That roadmap that Vincenzo just walked you through, if you're trying to develop products, if you're either you're trying to, maybe by the way, this happens. Some of our clients realize, man, I don't love my products anymore. They're cool, they're paying the bills, but I really want to develop a brand that has more meaning to me. I think the roadmap is to try to find products that fit that bill where grandma or Aunt Susie can use the product
Mm-hmm.
and enjoy using the product. I think the power of influencers is so high right now that finding an affiliate worthy product and designing it is really a worthy venture. And this should transform the way you design your next brand or your next product launch, because you should have in mind, and this is my opinion, I would love for this product to be more than $20, in terms of the retail
Mm-hmm.
price. I would love it to have really nice margins, which means you're going to have to design something different about it. And I would
Yeah.
love for that product to have some kind of lifestyle affinity,
Yes.
which is
Super
what
important.
Vincenzo, you call it kind of relatable, right? There's a story that matters. And if
Mm-hmm.
you kind of view your designs, like put them all on the whiteboard, and the ones that don't fit that matrix, cross them off and keep going,
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
like you said perfectly there, because actually when we are working sometimes on pro validation for the brands that we manage, one of the actually the checks that we have on our criteria is basically it needs to be social commerce friendly, right? When I make sure that it's a product that can be easily put on camera, it can be engaging, it can be fun, it can be funny, it can be something that people can really relate to a product that they have on a daily basis compared to something that is boring because I mean, you can also make a ton of money with boring products. Don't get me wrong. We have a lot of brands like that, but you have to understand if your goal is to make a brand, having that pillar of social commerce embedded into the product development is key because it's gonna make things so much easier. You're not only gonna be basically relying on PPC and things that are getting more and more challenging, and you actually have the opportunity to get more eyeballs from different sources that if you have a boring product you're going to struggle with. So actually yes, making sure your product is very social media friendly is going to give you a ton of advantage when it comes to expanding your brand and creating your audience for sure. Yeah.
Agreed, agreed, agreed. Hey, listen, if you guys, and I'm going to make sure there's a bunch of links for you here, Vincenzo, but if you look up Ecomc or Vincenzo's content, a lot of just tactical boots on the ground, very practical advice, tips, tricks, hacks on how to best launch products, how to use your PPC strategy to win in the 2024 ecosystem. I'm going to let you guys go find that because he's recorded some incredible content related to it. But before we close today's episode, Vincenzo, I just want to ask you the question I ask everybody on the show, which is
Yeah.
what's the habit, hack, or rhythm that gives you maximum ROI in your life?
Um, I would say something I started to practice, especially lately, that's been very helpful is being a gratitude, right? So, and this is something I would say that wasn't the case a couple of months back, which is something sometimes we don't stop and think and give credit about everything we have achieved in our business and also personal life. And I think this is something important because, especially in the past, I reached burnout because of that, because I was never thinking, oh, I'm actually going the right trajectory. I'm not growing fast enough here and there. And I will say this is something. The reason why I share this is because I go to a lot of events, and every single time I speak to people, I feel most people they always think they're not moving fast enough. They think they're not putting enough work into their business, and sometimes just the simple fact that they have lost the perception about all the effort they actually been putting. But then because sometimes increments are not big enough, you think you actually not moving forward. But trust me, people from outside can see it, and I see it from people that tell me that. And I just want you to give you that word of advice that if sometimes you sit down and look back the last 3 4 years and really go in depth and realize all the things you have achieved, you're gonna actually remove a lot of stress and weight from your shoulders and realize, you're doing okay. Sometimes you're gonna have ups and downs, but if you keep pushing, you're gonna find the light at the end of the tunnel. So that's my
Love
advice. Yeah.
it. Ben Hardy wrote a book a couple years ago called The Gap in the Gain. And
Yeah.
it's the exact what kind of the mantra you just mentioned there, which is as entrepreneurs, hard driving, type A, go build the world
Mm.
kind of people. We can live our lives. It's okay to not be content because we want to build a better future, but we can beat ourselves up so much by focusing on what hasn't happened, the
Exactly.
gap, rather than focusing on the
We don't
gain.
enjoy, and we don't enjoy the present. Then that's the
That's
issue.
right.
Yeah,
In
it's
fact,
a
some of
big
the
thing.
saddest entrepreneurs I've ever met are ones that haven't figured that out, Vincenzo. And then they sell a company and make a bunch of money and they just get really depressed. And so, again, guys, I love that advice from Vincenzo. Take a minute, be grateful for what you have.
Yeah,
Give yourself permission to be proud of the work you're doing. Enjoy the process. It's kind of like
yeah,
parenting. Like I love my kids. Sometimes they're a
yeah.
pain. I get it. But there's going to come a time really, really quickly where they're not going to be clamoring to sit in daddy's lap, right?
Exactly.
And so it's the same thing in our businesses. Like, I mean, the reality is like we gotta really stop and smell the roses and enjoy this ride. So
Yeah.
good advice, dude. Anything else for the good of the group before we close today's episode?
So, and I think another tip that is something's been very helpful, like try to, I mean, force to some extent every single day to at least spend 10 to 20 minutes to learn something new. It could be the simple stuff. It could be about, I don't know, how to open an email account. It could be about how to install a new app. It could be about the simple thing, because I have realized that when you do that and you create the habit, like 1 year down the line, you have learned so much compared to if you haven't done it. Like, and that's something, especially in the Amazon space, every single day I try to just go 5 10 minutes on LinkedIn and see what people like Tyler are saying about the Amazon space, or some of my partners or clients. And those incremental things, then 1 year down the line, you realize, wow, now I know about logistics, I know about PPC, I know about microeconomics, I know about uh, X, Y, and Z, because you spend those 10 minutes every day. So believe and trust the compound effect of those small tasks, because that's also a big thing that has been helpful for me. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well said, Vincenzo. Well, thanks again for joining the show today, Vincenzo. We'll
Pleasure.
make sure links to Ecomc, links to this great podcast that Vincenzo has. Sometime soon there'll be a killer episode that'll drop with a good looking bald guy on it. And guys, I want to make sure you can get a hold of all the content that Vincenzo puts out. Grateful for you to be with me here today, Vincenzo. I hope everyone who has made it to this point in the episode. I mean, guys, listen, it's been almost 40 minutes and you've given your life to us here. And we just want to say thanks. We are grateful for that. Hope you grab something that really serves you, that moves the needle for you in your business. Vincenzo, thanks again for joining the show today.
Thank you, Tad. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, guys, until I see you next week, cheers.
See ya.